You guys know by now that there are so many releases in the first half of 2023 and it can be a little bit hard to keep up with all these cheapies releasing left, right and center. So I'm here to help you guys out today and to condense these releases into the most crucial ones to see which of them deserve your cold hard cash. Let's go! So the first one on the list would be the Kiwiears Dolce. I completed the review for our favorite fruit brand IEM, but I have not gotten the time to post it yet. But from the get-go, I can tell you that the Dolce is a great cheapie. Now, Dolce is a reference to music notation where the player is to play sweetly and softly. It is rather affordable at $25 and in terms of build quality and accessories, I think it is fair. The Dolce features a typical custom universal shape that has a plastic faceplate with a nice blue gradient. In terms of build quality, I think it is really decent for the price and feels better than the Tangzu Wana. In terms of termination, the Dolce features a 2-pin termination which is nice and all. Cable on the Dolce is a basic OCC copper that does not feature a chin stop. I wish it did so that the cables can be a little easier to manage. Inside the chassis is a single dynamic driver that is made from low density polyethylene and liquid crystal polymer, which is also kinda cool in this price range. When it comes to sound, I do find that the Dolce performs best when it isn't pushed loud. It does sound very spacious with acoustic music. The Dolce can actually struggle a little bit when you listen to heavily compressed music in terms of dynamic range, such as metal where it struggles just a bit. And now you might wonder, why am I recommending an IEM that does not do everything well? I just find that the Dolce to be incredibly good when it comes to softer music, especially when you listen to acoustic music. So every time the guitar is strummed, the resonance it rings, all that is very beautiful. It's only when things get a bit more complex and full then it becomes to sound a little bit compressed. So the thing about the Dolce is that it is a V-shaped IEM that has a good quantity but not overpowering levels of bass. Mid-range is spacious and lively, and it still sounds adequately spacious when the bass lines are a little congested. Treble extension is not changing the paradigm and is acceptable in its cheapy price range. I like how tone is rendered on the Dolce. They have good levels of detail and texture, and because it is using a dynamic driver, it does not have any of the over-smoothened semblance that is commonly associated with a single BA. So the second earphone that I would take note in the first half of 2023 is the Truthear Zero Red or Project Red, which is another release that is rather well received in the world of chi-fi. It of course it's the worst kept secret in the chi-fi world, as it was seen quite a few times in a few headphone shows and events in different areas prior to release. I remember trying it out in CanJam Singapore 2023 back in March, where a prototype was floating around. Anyways, the Project Red is a version 2.0 of the original Zero. It features a lot of the same stuff, with the main difference being a red faceplate being used this time instead. It also inherits some of the annoying features of the original, that is to have a larger than normal nozzle that makes it quite hard to tip roll. I like the feathery details in the faceplate, which is quite pretty. The cables are funny because it is exactly the same one as the Truthear's Hexa, but Truthear's mentioned that on the Hexa it was silver plated copper, which is rather common, but on the Project Red they mentioned it was copper plated silver, which is quite different. So in terms of build quality, the Zeros feel light. It is a comfortable weight but does feel a little cheap in the hands. But this is the thing with light earphones. They tend to feel like that, but in return you get really good comfort because they just simply don't strain your ears. Underneath the hood is two dynamic drivers, a 7.8mm and a 10mm that is made from polyurethane suspension and a LCP or liquid crystal polymer dome diaphragm. As you might have expected, that the larger driver does the bass aspect, while the smaller one delivers the mid-range and highs. A 10 ohm resistor is also added for you to add a little bit more bass to the Project Red. I like the tone of the Project Red. It has a silky character that is smooth and still have sufficient texture. It is quite engaging when the bass drops. Personally, I like it with the 10 ohm adapter on, and you just get a bit more bass at the expense of slight detail. It again has a V-shaped sound that has elevated bass that is paired well with vocals, while the treble is sufficiently elevated, just not as elevated as another recent cheapy darling, the Simgot Ea500. For friends who have the original Zero, the Red does have a slight reduction of bass. So we just mentioned the recent darling, the Simgot Ea500, and it's on this list as well. I think that everybody by this point of time should have known about the Simgot Ea500. I must say that this is probably the freshest sounding earphone in the earlier half of 2023, where they deviated from the kind of boring Harman 2016 curve somewhat. The build of the Ea500 is simply exquisite and put most other IEMs in the same price category to shame. It has a premium mirror finish on the delightfully metal chassis, which is nice compared to its competition that uses herpy-derpy plastics. But it is not perfect though. The only real kicker is that there isn't any real metal fittings on the cable, which lowers its prestige by a little bit. I do feel that the Ea500 is a little cheap for what you are getting. The casework here is masterful and honestly a steal. Inside the chassis is a 10mm dynamic driver. I think Simgot really uses the expression that one good dynamic driver is basically all you need, and it can easily best more expensive chifi products that use multiple drivers. The Ea500 allows you to change the nozzle to tweak the sound. There are differences, but I won't say that it affects the tuning and tone too much. In terms of sound, the Ea500 again is another V-shaped sounding IEM, but this time around with a more prominent boost in the upper mid-range. For people who are used to duller sounding IEMs, this might come across as a little bit hot. But what you get in return is great technical performance, especially in the said price. Bass on the Ea500 has a beautiful slam, providing excellent texture as well. Bass is meaty without treading into bass head category. That can kind of throw off the mid-range balance as well, so honestly these are very well calibrated and tuned. There's a little bit more weight in the mid-bass section with good extension into the sub-bass. Transients on the bass frequencies is fast and it has alluring resonance as well. Details here are also rendered quite exquisitely. Mid-range is natural with just a touch of warmth. The level of realism that is rendered on the Ea500 when it comes to vocals allows emotions to be carried very well on this pair. Upper mid-range is emphasized here, and I think that this gives a very distinct overall edge to the overall sound of the Ea500 and aiding it in overall clarity and definition. Separation between the vocals and instrument here remains very excellent as well. Treble extension here is also exemplary. It extends well and has an airy character. As such, it does add spaciousness to the sound. Something quite premium in the cheapy segment of the market. Cymbals on the Ea500 are also rendered beautifully. There is a nice sizzle and bite, but the cymbals do not have too much of an irritating lingering frequency that can be fatiguing. A lot of thought has been put into the tuning to make them so classy sounding for the price. And now we deviate a bit from the previous few tunings. We are going to talk about the Blon Z300. Oppa and drums, believe, let music burn, Oppa Part 2, and never give up. So the Z300 is the alleged spiritual successor to the Blon BL03, which was very popular in its day, of which it looks suspiciously alike to the Bayer Dynamic Zenento. Today we have the Z300, which looks nothing like the BL03. The Z300 has a metal chassis, which is quite amazing for the price considered. Sometimes I wonder how they motivate the folks at the sweatshop to produce such things so cheaply. So the zinc alloy metal chassis is sandblasted and then anodized to this beautiful dark blue color, and later has the dragon logo lasered on the front of the faceplate. Oh, just so you know that there are basically two colors of the Z300, this matte blue one and a gold one as well. If you have sweaty fingers, I would suggest that you take the dark blue one as they hide fingerprints a little bit better. For those of you who want to cosplay as a Nigerian prince, then by all means get the gold one. You can live out your inner Nigerian prince fantasy. Inside the chassis is a 10mm silicone diaphragm. The silicone diaphragm material is possibly used to attenuate the upper mid-range frequencies and treble to allow it to sound nice and warm. Of course, this will be discussed when we talk about sound in a bit. When it comes to sound, the Z300 is a mild V, but harmonically it has a lot of influence from the lower mid-bass and bass region, so it sounds very nice, fat and warm. The Z300 is thick and large compared to other popular IEMs that has been recently released. For people who always prefer a thicker tonal weight, I think the Z3000 would be a good fit for you. This made me enjoy listening to male vocals as I love how it just renders them. There is a nice meatiness to the overall tone. The Z300 knows bass. It is able to pump out satisfying levels of it. I will not say that these are bass head IEMs, but the bass harmonics will influence the overall tonal color of the Z300. I do wish for better clarity when it comes to bass though. You feel much of the bass presented on the Z300, but it can be a little bit cleaner. However, I also know that these are really cheap, so it's kind of forgivable. Mid-range here takes a lot from the lower harmonics of the strong bass present on the Z300. Male vocals have a greater sense of presence as the supporting harmonics make them sound meatier. Texture and resolution here is good for the price. This is a good point to consider if you're looking for a pair of cheap earphones that allow for euphoric male vocal presentation. Female vocals too here have a little bit more lower mid-range harmonics going on. They still sound dainty but with a little bit more body, just less sprightly than usual. Treble extension here is average. Cymbals and crashes sizzle enough, they are not too in your face and harsh. It retreats quite quickly and never overstays its welcome. Treble is well balanced in relation to the other frequency band, but they are not the main focus on the Z300. It is present enough, giving enough edge to the overall sound rather than to have the Z300 sounding a little bit too blunt. And yeah, so those are my champions for the first half of 2023 when it comes to chifi. The Ea500 is the technical standout from my exploration, while the Blons have a nice entry-level, meaty, warm tone just to mix things around. The Dolce has its place when it comes to acoustic music because I like the resonance that it gives when it transitions from soft to slightly louder, but don't overpower it, then it can sound a little bit compressed. The Project Ridge remains an easy crowd pleaser as it is just so darn inoffensive. Also, the 10mm resistor that is provided adds a nice touch for you to tweak sound somewhat. With that said, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Supertron Super Audio Show where we talk about some super cool ear and some super cool stuff. If you like the content so far, please kindly press the like and subscribe button somewhere down below. It will help me out a bunch and I greatly appreciate it. With that said, I hope to see you guys soon.